Next morning, the tolling of the bells rang solemnly over the town. Up the narrow, steep street, the devout made their way toward the high-perched barefoot friars' church. Velvet and silk, and the humbler but still Sunday-worthy fabrics, moved toward the house of God, not only for his honor, but just as plainly for the eyes of their neighbors. From the stately corner house on the market square, a small black-wrapped figure slipped out. No one would have recognized, beneath the coarse, shapeless mantle clumsily fastened beneath the chin, the delicate and graceful form of little Felicitas. Friederike had thrown the ugly garment over her with great importance, explaining that Madame was giving her this fine wrap for mourning. Then she had opened the house door and strictly forbidden the child to go into the family pew. There would be room for her among the schoolchildren. Felicitas tucked her hymn book under her arm and hurried round the corner. It was clear she wished to go on quickly. But over there, advancing with measured step, came 3 black-clad figures that instantly checked her pace. There she was, the great lady, walking between her 2 sons, and all who met them bowed deeply. All year long, she scarcely bestowed a kind glance on anyone. The mouth that prayed in church so often spoke harshly to those who sought her aid. The smaller boy at her left hand struck the little beggars who ventured into the house and kicked them besides. He lied abominably and then swore by all that was holy that he had not lied, and yet it harmed him nothing. Now the 3 disappeared into the church, into their strictly enclosed pew behind its genteel panes of glass, and there they would pray to the dear God, who surely loved them and would one day admit them to his heaven, for after all, they were not show folk. Felicitas waited until they had gone in. Then she slipped on, past the open church doors from which the organ tones already rolled out, carrying magic glimpses of the dim nave over the thickly packed rows of worshippers. But the organ's voice beat in vain against the small heart thudding and burning outside in rebellious pain. Today she could not pray to the dear God. He would know nothing of her poor mother, shot down, and would not suffer her in his bright heaven. She lay lonely out in the churchyard, and to the churchyard the child must go. She must visit her. Felicitas turned into another street, steeper even than the one below their house. Soon she reached the ugly town gate with its still uglier tower crouching above, but beyond the arch there was a gleam of green. Up there the well-kept lime avenues curved in strange contrast round the blackened city walls, like a fresh wreath laid about a gray head. How solemnly still it was here! The child was startled by the crunch of her own footsteps on the gravel. She knew she was on forbidden ground. Yet she walked faster and faster, and at last stood, drawing a deep breath, beside the gate of the burying ground. Never yet had she entered that quiet place. She knew nothing of the small, even plots lying side by side, the last stones under which all the varied stir of life suddenly ceases. Beside the black iron bars, 2 tall elder bushes thrust their branches out, heavy with black shining berries, and close by rose the gray masonry of an old church, gloomy enough to behold. But beyond it stretched a wide expanse sown with flowers and shrubs, on which the mild autumn sun poured its gold. "Whom are you looking for, little one?" asked a man standing in his shirt sleeves at the mortuary door, puffing blue clouds from his pipe into the clear air. "My mamma," answered Felicitas quickly, her eyes roving over the sea of blossoms. "So she is here already. And who was she?" "She was a showman's wife." Ah, the one that was killed in the town hall 5 years ago? She's over yonder near the corner of the church." Thus the forsaken child stood at last before the patch of earth that covered the object of all her tender, yearning dreams. All around lay tended graves. Most were thickly covered with asters of every hue, so that it looked as though the dear Lord had let all his stars fall in a shower from the sky. Only the narrow strip beneath her feet showed parched grass, threaded with coarse couch grass. Careless feet had already worn a path over it. The soil had sunk, and with it the plain white stone at the foot of the neglected mound. Metador Lauska stood upon it in black letters close to the crumbling edge. Felicitas crouched by the stone and dug her little hands into a bare spot in the turf. Earth. Nothing but earth. That heavy, senseless weight lay upon the tender face, the beloved form in its shining atlas gown, the flowers held in the lily-white, stiffened hands. Now the child understood that her mother had not merely been asleep that night. "Dear Mamma," she whispered, "you cannot see me, but I am here, close to you, and if the dear God wants nothing to do with you, he has not given you even one little flower, and no one cares for you. I love you, and I will always come to you. I will love only you alone, not even the dear God, for he is so hard and cruel to you." It was the child's first prayer over the grave of her proscribed mother. A faint wind passed by, soft and cool, like the smoothing hand of a mother upon the fevered forehead of her child. The asters nodded toward the little mourner. In the dry seed heads there was a whispering murmur, and above them the sky arched in limpid clearness, the eternal sky which men's notions turn into a battlefield of earthly passions. When Felicitas at last returned to the dark house on the market, she knew not how long she had sat in reverie upon the wide, still field of the dead. She found the front door only on the latch. She slipped in, but at once drew back in terror, for the door of her uncle's room stood open. Johannes's voice sounded out, and she heard his firm, measured steps. For all the strange new spirit of defiance risen within her since yesterday, the dread of that motionless, cold voice and those implacable gray eyes was stronger still. She could not possibly enter the line of sight of the half-open door. Her little feet felt rooted to the stone. "I entirely agree with you, Mamma," Johannes was saying. The troublesome little creature would be best off in some decent tradesman's household. But this unfinished letter is, to me, as binding as a will. In one place, Papa states that he will not, on any account, let the child pass from the shelter of his house, unless the father himself should come to claim her. And here in the words, "I should therefore most unreservedly entrust to you the care of the child committed to me," he appoints me, beyond question, executor of his wishes. It is not for me to criticize my father's acts, but had he known how unspeakably repugnant to me is the class from which the child is sprung, he would have spared me this guardianship. "You do not know what you ask of me, Johannes," replied the widow in deepest vexation. "For 5 long years I have silently endured this outcast at my side. I can bear it no longer." "Then nothing remains to us but an appeal to the Father." "Yes, call on him," laughed Mrs. Watt, Hellwig shortly and bitterly. "He thanks God to be rid of the child that ate his bread. Dr. Bohm tells me the man wrote once from Hamburg, once at the beginning, and then never again. As a good Christian, dearest Mamma, you will scarcely allow the child to return where its soul must be lost." "It is lost already." "No, Mamma, I do not deny that light-minded blood runs in its veins, But I also believe in the blessing of good training. You propose, then, that we continue paying heavy money year after year for a creature that is nothing on God's earth to us? She has lessons in French and drawing. Heaven forbid! Johannes broke in sharply. For the first time his monotonous voice had an edge. Heaven forbid! This whole modern system of female education is hateful to me. Women like you, who in true Christian spirit and womanly modesty never overstep the boundaries set for them, such women will soon be hard to find. No, all that ends today. Train the girl in the duties she is born to. Household service. I leave the matter entirely in your hands. With your strong will, your Christianity. The door was suddenly flung wide, and Nathaniel, evidently bored by the discussion, bounded out. Felicitas pressed herself against the wall, but he saw her and swooped down like a hawk. Yes, hide yourself. That won't help you, he cried, squeezing her thin wrist so hard she cried out. Now you're coming in, and you'll tell Mama the text of the sermon. You can't, can you? You were not on the school benches. I watched. And look at yourself. Mama, only look at this frock. With this, he dragged the struggling child to the door. Come in, child, ordered Johannes, standing in the middle of the room with his father's letter still in his hand. Felicitas crossed the threshold hesitantly. For an instant, she looked up at the long, spare figure before her. Not a speck of dust marred the fine black cloth. The linen shone dazzlingly white. Not a hair on his brow was out of place beneath the hand that was forever smoothing it. His eyes rested with a sort of loathing on the hem of her dress. Where did you get that? He asked, pointing to the soiled border. The child looked down in anxiety. Indeed, it was a sorry sight. The grass and paths had been wet with dew. In throwing herself on the grave, she had not thought the marks would show. She stood silent, eyes cast down. So, no answer? You look like a bad conscience. You were not in church, I suppose? No, she said frankly. And where were you? She did not speak. She would sooner have been struck dead than utter her mother's name in that room. I'll tell you, Johannes, put in Nathaniel. She was out in the garden stealing fruit. That's what she always does. Felicitas shot him a look of fiery scorn, but her lips remained shut. Answer, commanded Johannes. Is what Nathaniel says true? No, he has lied, as he always lies, she replied firmly. Johannes stretched out an arm and held Nathaniel back. The boy had already made a furious movement. Do not touch her, Nathaniel, said Mrs. Hellwig, rising from the armchair at the window. Her dark shadow fell across the room as she stood. You will believe me, Johannes, she said, when I assure you that Nathaniel never utters an untruth. He is pious and walks in the fear of the Lord as few children do. I have guided him. That must suffice you. It only needed that this miserable creature should set herself between brother and sister, as she already set herself between the parents. Is it not unpardonable that, instead of going to church, she wanders elsewhere, wherever she may have been? Her eyes swept the child with deadly coldness. Where is the new shawl you had this morning? She demanded. Felicitas's hands flew to her shoulders. It was gone, lying still on the grave, no doubt. She knew how careless she had been. Shame bent her head, tears filled her eyes. A plea trembled on her lips. Well, what do you say to that, Johannes? Asked Mrs. Hellwig sharply. A few hours ago I give her the shawl, and already she has lost it. I should like to know how much her clothes have cost your dear father in a year. Give her up, I tell you. Hop and malt are spoilt here. You will never root out what she inherits from a frivolous, dissolute mother. At that word, a dreadful change came over the child. A deep crimson surged over her face and neck. The tears of penitence still sparkled, but now her eyes blazed. The timid awe of the woman who had weighed on her like a nightmare for 5 years was gone. Everything that had tormented her since yesterday swept up at once. She was beside herself. "Say nothing against my poor mamma. I will not bear it," she cried. Her usually soft voice rang sharp. "She has never harmed you. We must not speak evil of the dead. Uncle always said so, for they cannot defend themselves. You do it all the same, and that is bad, very bad." "Do you see the little fury, Johannes?" sneered Mrs. Hellwig. "That is the result of your father's liberal upbringing. That is the fairy-like little creature, so he calls her." "She is right to defend her mother," murmured Johannes gravely. "But the manner is ungoverned and detestable. How dare you address this lady so? Do you not know you must starve if she gives you no bread, and that the paving stones will be your pillow if she turns you out?" "I do not want her bread," cried the child. "She is a bad woman. She has dreadful eyes. I will not stay here, where there is nothing but lies and one must be afraid all day. I would rather go at once under the dark earth to my mother. I would rather starve." She could say no more. Johannes had seized her arm. His thin fingers closed like iron clamps. He shook her roughly. "Come to your senses, you detestable child. Fie! Such violence in a girl. To the inborn lawlessness this passion besides. I see much has been neglected here," he added, turning to his mother. "But under your discipline, mamma, things shall be altered." He did not release her arm, but led her out into the servants' room. "From today I have authority over you. Remember that," he said harshly. "And though I may be away, I shall know how to punish you whenever I hear you have failed in obedience to my mother. For your behavior today, you are sentenced to strict confinement for a long time. You have made bad use of freedom. You are not to enter the garden again without my mother's permission, nor go into the street except on the way to the day school, which you will now attend. Here in the servants' room you will take your meals and spend your days until you show better manners. Have you understood me?" The little girl turned her face away in silence, and he left the room.